morning. This week's Sunday morning message will be out of the book of Proverbs, chapter 16. The preparations of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. All the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirits. Commit your works to the Lord, and your thoughts will be established. The Lord has made all for himself, yes, even for the wicked, for the day of doom. Everyone proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Though they join forces, none will go unpunished. In mercy and truth, atonement is provided for iniquity. And by the fear of the Lord, one departs from evil. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Better is a little with righteousness than vast revenues without justice. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Verses 1 through 9 begin with a discussion of man's plans. Human nature can lead us into arrogance and ignorance when we don't seek God's will or examine our own motives. It often leads to disaster. Despite what you may tell yourself, the Lord sees the heart. He examines the spirit, and he determines what will happen. The Lord is sovereign. He has a purpose for everything that he created. God detests arrogance. It is spiritual pride that often causes a person to reject God. But God is pleased when a person turns away from evil. Godly wisdom is far better than any earthly material. You know, the best chance for success is when your plans are aligned with truth. That means that those who submit to God's will and seek him are in a far better position than those who reject or ignore him. Of course, John 16:33 says the following God does not guarantee earthly success. However, acting in accordance with goodness and truth removes any dangers from life, according to Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, 13:20 through 22. When someone's efforts are fully entrusted in God's will and control, their labors are less likely to be their downfall. If you are a child of God, then your manager or your supervisor or whatever is not your boss. You're not working for man. You're working for God and his glory. Divination is on the lips of the king. His mouth must not transgress in judgment. Honest weights and scales are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are his work. It is an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for a throne is established by righteousness. Righteous lips are the delight of kings, and they love him who speaks what is right. As messengers of death is the king's wrath, but a wise man will appease it. In the light of the king's face is life, and his favor is like a cloud of the latter rain. Here Solomon offers several perspectives on kings and rulers. He points out the fact that those in authority have great power, so it's common sense to avoid their wrath whenever possible. Some of these statements are expressions of ideals how a godly king should act. Commitment to good and a distaste for evil are what should influence a king's rule over his kingdom. Evildoers are a threat to peace and prosperity. Honesty in kings and their subjects contribute to the success of their kingdoms. In Psalm 72, a prayer is cited in which the psalmist begins by asking, "Give the king your justice, O God, and your righteousness to the royal son. May he judge your people with righteousness, and your poor with justice." How much better to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. The highway of the upright is to depart from evil. He who keeps his way preserves his soul. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. He who heeds the word wisely will find good, and whoever trusts in the Lord, happy is he. The wise in heart will be called prudent, and sweetness of the lips increases learning. Understanding is a wellspring of life to him who has it, but the correction of fools is folly. The heart of the wise teaches his mouth, and adds learning to his lips. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul, and health to the bones. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. The person who labors for himself, for his hungry mouth drives him on. Verses 16 through 26 are a series of proverbs relating to the value of wisdom, controlled speech, and self-reflection. Arrogance leads to disaster as it prevents a person from following God's will or recognizing their own errors. It is so valuable to have truth, and using careful words to speak truth will make others more likely to accept it. On the other hand, using words hatefully or out of spite can cause incredible damage. Verse 18 is often cited. It notes that arrogance puts a person at risk for danger. As with many such statements, it is true in both spiritual and physical ways. Cocky fighters, those who become too self-confident, may suffer a stunning upset, and history itself is full of upsetting losses and tragedies that were set up by someone's smug attitude. What's even more dangerous is spiritual pride, which is the arrogance that assumes that they don't need God's merciful forgiveness. Those who are too proud to humble themselves before judgment will be humbled anyway, but only before being cast into the lake of fire for an eternity. In Luke chapter 18, verses 19 through 14, Jesus told a parable warning about arrogance, showing the difference between the self-assured Pharisee and the self-aware tax collector. Famously, in Daniel chapter 4, verses 29 to 33, King Nebuchadnezzar is a proud person who gets humbled by God. It reports that Nebuchadnezzar was walking on the roof of his palace in Babylon when he boasted, "Is not this great Babylon, which I had built by mighty power as a royal residence, and for the glory of my majesty?" The next two verses tell us that while he was mouthing these arrogant words, a voice from heaven announced that he would lose his throne and become an exile, like an animal living among animals. As promised, Nebuchadnezzar was driven insane and ate grass like an ox. In Daniel chapter 4, verses 34 through 37, God mercifully restored him with a much improved attitude. Verse 19 follows the denunciation of the arrogant who reject God. This again notes how much more valuable spiritual riches are compared to material wealth. Poverty is especially preferable to gaining wealth than by pride and immorality. Author C.S. Lewis once said that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. The goal of humility is not to have a lower view of ourselves. At the same time, this proverb is found near others that warn about arrogance, the opposite of humility, which come with great risk. Proverbs chapter 16, verses 5 and verse 18. True humility is often misinterpreted as weakness, but is actually a sign of great strength. Christ's life gives us the perfect example of godly humility. He humbled himself to become our Savior. He demonstrated strength by doing the Father's will, though it meant pouring out his life for us on the cross. Philippians chapter 2, 5 through 8. An ungodly man digs up evil, and it is on his lips like a burning fire. A perverse man sows strife, and a whisperer separates the best of friends. A violent man entices his neighbor, and leads him in a way that is not good. He winks his eye to devise perverse things. He purses his lips and brings about evil. The silver-haired head is a crown of glory, if it is found in the way of righteousness. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. The concluding section of this chapter contrasts evil people with those who are righteous. Solomon offers additional warnings about self-control and the importance of reining in one's temper. Through all things, even those we think of as random, God is ultimately in control. Thank you for watching. Next week, we will be continuing out of the book of Proverbs with chapter 17. God bless.